A couple months ago, I discovered the subreddit r/books that feel like this, and it changed the way that I looked at discovering new books to read. The internet has done a lot of awful things for us, like put us in direct contact with each other. It's also given us this amazing tool of discovery. Reviewing books has always been something that I've loved to watch. I love watching people describe why they love a book, the themes that it presents, why this book is worthy of you, the watcher, reading it. But what could be more compelling than showing you what the book is all about? And that's what r/books that feel like this is all about. Each post is a series of curated photos that are supposed to give you the feeling of reading the book. It is impossible for us to go into the brains of each other and feel the way we felt or imagine the things we imagined when we read a book for the first time that heavily impacted us. But by putting it into a visual language through these series of photos, it makes it so much easier to get at the heart of why you really liked a book. So I let the internet decide what I read this entire month. I went entirely off of vibes because this is what this subreddit is all about. So I just scrolled through until I found photos that I really liked and looked at all the comment sections. The comment sections were filled with people giving their suggestions for the best books. And for the most part, I just went with the most liked comment because I felt like if the majority of people agreed that this book was very indicative of the photo set that it was representing, then it's probably a good fit. I saw photo sets that looked very haunting and alluring. I saw photo sets representing artists that create these huge celestial works that are very intimidating and also quite haunting. I also saw photos of hot dogs. That one really caught my interest. And for every one of those posts that I saved, I looked for the top comment, picked a book to read, and bought it from my local bookshop. And also managed to grab a chicken bake along the way. Or creamy. We went to the bookshop where they were so helpful, by the way. This place is called Ink at 84. I'm not gonna lie, I think that my eyes were larger than my stomach on this one. I definitely bit off more than I can chew, but I did get through almost every single one of these books before I tapped out this week and knew that I needed to make this video. The first book that I picked up was Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a feminist retelling of the witch Circe's origin story in Greek mythology. If you've never heard the tale before, she's the one that took wayward sailors and turned them into pigs. Okay, I finished my first book of the month, Circe. Highly, highly enjoyed it. I think the thing about this book that I really liked is that it put certain Greek mythology into context, into like a feminist context, because when you hear about Greek mythology, it can feel really random. Like it's like, oh, Zeus's head cracked open and then Athena stepped on out. Like if you know Greek mythology, it's always kind of like nonsensical, but if you put it in the context of the society at the time, it would have had its own context. So I really like the idea that this was put into modern day context. For instance, an evil witch who lives on an island by herself just turns men into pigs when they land on her island. It sounds nonsensical, but when you put it into the context that she is getting retribution for what's happened to her. Also love the idea of these power structures that exist, like patriarchy existing even in godhood and goddesshood, the hierarchy of the nymphs versus the gods versus the demigods. And like, you know, there was a line in there somewhere that I underlined. Punishments were only for the daughters. The sons were never punished. And I feel like that's kind of the narrative of this entire book. I would give Circe a 4.5 out of 5. I deeply enjoyed it, and it was a great book to start this whole reading saga. Now, before we get into the rest of the books, let's take a brief moment to thank my paid partner, BetterHelp, for partnering with me on this video. With springtime comes spring cleaning, renewal, goal setting, being more social, and a lot of pressure to be really good at doing all of those things. This can really intensify perfectionism and our feeling that we're not enough when we see everyone else doing exactly that. Clearing out the cobwebs of winter can be stress-inducing, and my paid partner BetterHelp can connect you with a therapist who can give you support during this time. The majority of BetterHelp members seek support for anxiety, and 69% of members report improved anxiety symptoms after 6 weeks of therapy on BetterHelp. It's easy to start. Just fill out a questionnaire and they'll connect you with a credentialed therapist as soon as possible. You can easily switch therapists at no extra cost if it's not the right fit. They carefully make sure the therapists on the platform are well qualified, and their customer support team is there if you have any questions. Let BetterHelp help you rule your anxiety so it doesn't rule you. Click the link in my description or go to betterhelp.com/rose and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Thank you again to BetterHelp for partnering with me on this video. Now let's get back to the book reviews. The second book that I read this month was called A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. I felt very conflicted about this book because this was a book that was written before 1969, but it's got a really tragic backstory. John Kennedy Toole sadly took his own life before this book was even published, and his mom begged a local professor at a university to read the manuscript and help her get the book published, and it happened, and now this has become kind of a great American novel akin to like Infinite Jest. People describe those two books in very similar ways. Maybe because of the tragedy surrounding the author, but also because of the way that it takes a wry and comedic eye at society. This book is very interesting because the main character, Ignatius, is almost a Christ-like character in this book, not because he is moral or superior in any way, but mainly because he hangs out with everyone who exists on the fringes of this society. And when you read this, something that was written in, the 60s, this feels like a very modern book. This book was funny, highly irreverent. There are so many fart jokes in this. It's like actually paramount that this character releases gas. Like that's part of his character. So that part, very, very fun. The hot dog photo makes a lot of sense. He also at one point is a weenie salesman. Like he sells hot dogs in New Orleans, and that's a delightful little path that he goes down. In him being so insufferable, he humanizes every single person that he comes in contact with, and I think that is a really interesting and compelling reason to read this book, especially knowing the history of the author and the time at which this was penned. So I give this a 4.5 as well. I really enjoyed this, and I would read this again. I actually thought that this was written in like the 80s or the 90s based on the language, but knowing that it's from the 60s is kind of nuts. The third book that I read was called Mexican Gothic, and the photos of this book, like the photos that inspired me to read this, were so good that I just like had to read this book. And you know what? It delivered. I really, really enjoyed this book. Just finished Mexican Gothic. So this is the third book of the month. I love a mystery. Who doesn't love like an Agatha Christie-esque mystery? I loved the setting of this. I loved the main character. I loved her attitude. I really liked that every time I was like, get out of there, girl, she tried to do just that. You never felt like the character was betraying what a normal person would do in this circumstance. I think it had a very satisfying ending. And I really liked the romantic aspect of it. It definitely heavily referenced a lot of Shirley Jackson's work. If you've ever read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, I think that's what it's called, or Haunting of Hill House. If you've read either of those books, gave a very similar unease. It just felt a little bit more modernized, even though it's set in the 1950s in Mexico. I also weirdly really liked the elements of fashion. There was a lot of references to the outfits that the main character was wearing, and I actually deeply enjoyed that. Like, this girl was serving cunt the whole time while also solving like effectively like a murder mystery. I love a spooky horror. I love something a little occult, a little off kilter, and it's set in a haunted house, which I love. Like, I couldn't actually put this book down. I really, really wanted to finish it. And I thought the love story within it was very satisfying. I need to see if Silvia Moreno-Garcia has written anything else because I want to read it. This was delightful. She was allowed to be like very sassy, very fashionable, and also incredibly witty, and kept her wits about her. Yeah, I think I would also give this one a 4.5. These are all very good books. The internet had great suggestions. The next book I read, I was a little scared to read this. This is called Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. This book is all about a young girl finding a giant metal hand in this very like odd pit in her backyard in the middle of the woods. And it's all told through what appear to be military interviews with each person who's kind of been in contact with the hand. I don't want to spoil anything, but the hand is not the only body part that exists. And this book is all about finding all of those body parts and figuring out where these colossal metal body parts came from. And it appears it might be aliens. So if that tickles your fancy at all, I highly recommend reading this. It's very existential. I think it's very politically savvy. I thought that this was going to be a very depressing read by the end of it, but I ended up loving the ending, and I saw that there's actually another book to this. I think this is a series, and I really, really, really want to read it. Like, I heavily enjoyed this. I would say that this isn't as much of a cosmic horror as I thought it was going to be. Based on the pictures that this was recommended by, I thought it was going to be a lot of like this looming sense of something happening. You know what I mean? Like this fear that something was going to come and like annihilate the earth or something. But not totally the vibe. There's a little bit of that, and it's good sci-fi. And I will say this looks like a pretty thick book, but because it is written in the interview style, you eat up pages really quickly, so it's not hard to jump into this. I also think this book starts really strong and ends really strong, and the middle is really good too. And I'm not gonna lie, I think this is my 5 out of 5 book so far out of all of these. I really, really loved this. Next up was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jesse Sutanto. Unfortunately, this is what I'm going to consider my one not so loved read of this bunch. If I treated this as a beach read or as a more casual read, I think that I could get past it and not be that upset about it. But I think that I read so many other good books this month that this just felt like the stinker out of the bunch. It follows Vera Wong, who is a first-generation Chinese immigrant in her 60s, as she navigates her life in a small, rundown tea shop in the middle of San Francisco. Someone dies in her tea shop, and every single one of the suspicious characters that could surround the person's death end up at her tea shop, and they all start to try to solve the murder with her, but they're also suspects. So she's suspicious of them, but she keeps making lunch for them and like hanging out with them and kind of being their best friends. So like kind of a confusing book because I'm like, girl, self-preservation? I loved Vera Wong. Like I loved the main character. I thought she was amazing. Again, the photo set that this book was recommended by was an amazing photo set. And I was like, oh, I really want to read a book that has this vibe. And I think the main character actually perfectly encapsulates that vibe. She is vivacious, she is interesting, she has her own rich inner world, and like that's rare in older women in fiction. So I love that about this book. It's actually the one thing that I think really shines very clear in this book and the thing that I really love about it. The thing that I didn't really like was that the plot felt a little bit meandering and obvious. I feel like I was never suspicious of the suspects. Like I instantly thought that they were fine and they were good people. And also the book writes itself as if all of these characters are good people. So it's like, and also the murdered victim is painted as a really bad guy the entire book. So you don't really care about him, and you don't really care that he got murdered, and you don't really want anyone to get accused of anything. And I kind of wish there was a little bit more tension with that. Like I wish that the police had maybe suspected that it was a murder. They decide that it's just, I don't want to give anything away, but they kind of like decide that it's not a murder very quickly in the book. And so they just kind of stop looking for the killer. So it just stops being a murder mystery at that point. And then it's just kind of a bit of a beach read. Anyways, I would give this a 2 out of 5 just because it is not my style, but I really, really loved the main character and I thought she was written brilliantly. The last book that I'm reading this month, I'm still reading because it is very dense. It is a lot to absorb. So I am still cracking away at this, although I will say, it's April 24th as I film this, so I actually am still going to finish this in April. Take that. But this is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I told people that I was going to read this book, and they were like, get ready. It's basically like a book. Like, there is a lot of scary, murdery things in this. It is quite a hopeless, horrifying book, but that is the vibe that I got when I looked at the pictures on Reddit that this book was recommended under. It is a very haunting photo set, and I kind of wanted to be challenged by it. I was like, can I read a book like that? Will that freak me out? So far, yes. So far, very bloody, very lawless, but I'm not even 100 pages in and I'm already a little freaked. I'm scared of the main character. I'm scared of everyone in this. But it is considered one of the great American novels, so I feel like I should probably finish it. So I am going to finish it if I don't get deeply depressed by it. Those were all the books that I read this month. I loved the idea of getting all my suggestions from Reddit. Something like r/this book feels like is perfect if you can't figure out what to read next. I highly recommend it. Just scroll through some of the photo sets until something sparks joy and buy the first book that's recommended. You will not regret it. Thank you to everyone who stayed until the end of this video. Roll the cute kitty clips.